this is Bethany Daly with Getting It Pegged, an authentic knitting board, bringing you the newest edition of our Stitchology series. This month, we're going to work on the scalloped shell knitting pattern that you see here. Right, I have cast on our sample stitches here, and this is just a repeat of one of the repeating pattern stitches, and I've done 3 of the rows 1 through 8 to start with, and you can see how it's already making a scallop on the bottom, and it just does that naturally, and then just creates these beautiful little shells in the center with the eyelets surrounding each of the shells. So let's get started. I have cast on from left to right, and then the pattern is worked beginning with the first row and all odd rows working from right to left, and all even rows working from left to right. And of course this definitely can be worked in the round, which I would cast on in a clockwise direction and knit all the rows in a clockwise direction. So I've cast on here 11 stitches. Okay, the first row and the second and third row actually are all going to be knit, just the regular knit stitch. And actually for this, normally I like to use the U-stitch for my stitch patterns, but because this one requires having a little bit more looseness to the stitches, I'm doing the traditional knit stitch, or what they would call the true knit stitch or reverse purl. So that's what I have going on here for all of these stitches, so that we have a proper gauge to be able to move the stitches around like we need to. Okay, so rows 1 through 3, we're just going to knit them all, and we'll see you back here when you've got them all done. All right, I've completed knitting rows 1 through 3, and now I'm ready to do row 4, which is going to be all purls. Okay, there we are. Now we're done with the first 4 rows of the 8 stitch pattern rows. Now row 5 is where we're going to begin our scallops and our shells. And this may look a little complicated, but it really is easy when we just break it down step by step. So this starts with a knit 1, and then a yarn over, knit 1 2 times, and then a double yarn over 5 times, a knit 1, yarn over 2 times, and then a knit 1 at the end. So we're going to start at peg 1, and we're just going to knit it. Okay, and then it says to repeat twice, a yarn over and a knit 1. So now the way to do that, so that we don't have to move because normally to create those yarn overs you would have to have an empty peg to create a yarn over on, so you'd have to move your stitches and spread it out and then move it back, which is a little complicated. It could be fine on this number of stitches, but when you're dealing with a lot of repeats of it or working in the round, it can get nearly impossible to move those stitches around so much. So we're going to use the peg doubling method to use one peg to hold 2 stitches on it, and I will show you that right now. So it says yarn over and then knit 1, and you're going to repeat those 2 stitches twice. So in order to do that, we're just going to bring our working yarn back around to the front of peg 1, and that is going to be our first yarn over. And I'll show you how we can make it go to its own peg home in a few rows, or in a little bit. So here's the first yarn over. Then we're going to go to peg 2 and go ahead and knit it. Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing and use peg 2 twice as a stitch holder for the next yarn over. So we just wrap around it clockwise, lay it across the front of the peg, and that's our yarn over. And then peg 3 is a knit, and that completes our 2 yarn overs and knits. And then it's going to go into the double yarn overs, which we're going to repeat 5 times. So the way to do that is simply to go to peg 4, and you're going to wrap around peg 4 2 times, and that creates our double yarn overs. And then we're going to take the bottom loop and knit it off over the top 2, just like that. And there we go, we've made our 2 double yarn overs, and we're going to do it 5 times. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, now we're back to yarn over knit twice. Or actually, I'm sorry, it's knit. It switches around for the end of this, at the end of the row. So first we do a knit and then a yarn over. So wrap it around clockwise, around peg, let's see, that would be 9. And then you're going to just take it straight to peg 10, knit it, then wrap around again on peg 10 clockwise, and then take straight to peg 11 and knit it. And there we have finished setting up our scallop and shell rows or stitches on row 5. All right, so now row 6, it looks a little complicated again when you're just reading the instructions, but we're going to break it down peg by peg, and it's really easy. So this one is a purl 5, and then with the working yarn in back, slip 5, and then purl 5 again. So let's go ahead and break this down. We're going to purl the last peg, so peg 11, and then we're going to purl this yarn over that's at the top, the loop that's at the top of peg 10, purl it, and then just temporarily move it to peg 11, and then purl the loop that's on peg 10 remaining. Now we're going to do the same thing. Purl the top yarn over loop on peg 9 and temporarily move it to peg 10. Then purl the loop that's on peg 9 at the bottom. So now we have done 5 purls, and we've managed to go through those temporary holding pegs with the 2 stitches on each. Now the next thing in this row says, with working yarn behind, we're going to slip 5 stitches. Now those 5 stitches are these double E wrap pegs. So to get that accomplished, we're first going to I'm going to push them all up to the top, those double loops, up to the top of the pegs, and then I'm going to release the top loop. Just take it off of the top of the peg like that, so that our double wraps are released into just one big long wrap. Just like that. Now I'm going to take a cable needle. It doesn't have to be a cable needle. It can be anything really that will hold your stitches, just for this little maneuver we're going to do now. So I'm going to go in order from right to left, move these long loops without applying any tension to them so that they don't lose the length that we've built into them. And the loops get uneven. We're just going to carefully place them, the first 4 onto the cable needle, and then the 5th one we're going to make sure that there is no twist in the stitch. See how it's now, our legs of the stitch are not crossed at all? We're going to move that over to the 3rd peg of the 5 double E wraps. So we've skipped 2 and we've moved it to the 3rd peg there. And now you're going to do the same for the remaining. And we're releasing those in order from left to right, making sure to release the twist. See, when I take it off of there, if I turned it this way, it would be twisted. So we want to make sure that the legs of the loops are not twisted. And then you place it on the holding peg, the 3rd peg. And again, be careful not to change the length of the loops any, as much as possible. And then now we have 5 stitches on 1 peg, which is the center of the 5. Now we're going to take these empty pegs here and we're going to fill them with our holding pegs that we have here, so that each peg will now have only 1 loop. So we'll move the loop from peg 9 to peg, let's see, that's peg 7, and it's going to stretch. It's going to become a big loop, but that's okay. We'll fix the tension in a second. And then we'll take the top loop on peg 10, move it to peg 8, loop from peg 11 on the bottom, or 10 on the bottom, and move it to 10. And then the top loop we have on peg 11 is going to go on peg 10. Now here is where we're going to just start working from left to right. Pull the extra looseness that has happened from us moving the stitches. You're just going to pull those out. So now we have even tension on all the pegs. And here is where we're going to accomplish the with working yarn and back. We're going to slip 5 stitches, and all that is carrying it behind peg 7 of, which is the center of the 5 double E wraps, where we have all 5 of them now situated. So that's just carrying it behind that peg. All right, now on this side of the 5 loops, double loops, we're going to go ahead and purl and move all of the loops over to fill in these gaps right away. We're going to do it all at one time. So we're going to purl the loop on peg 3 and scooch it over here to peg 5. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I'm sorry. So the peg that's holding all of these 5 loops is peg 6. I said that wrong. Okay, so now we're going to purl the top loop on peg 2. and move it over to peg 4. Purl the loop on the bottom of peg 2 and move it to peg 3. Purl the top loop on peg 1 and move it to peg 2. There we go. Now we've filled all of those holes, and we're going to, or the empty pegs, and we're going to start with peg 4 or 5 and take the tension out again that we've made from moving the loops and work to peg 2 like this, and then purl peg 1. There we go. And now we've completed row 6 of our 8. Row 7 begins with a knit 5, and then with working yarn and back, slip 5, and then knit 5. So we're going to go ahead and do that. It's super easy. Knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then slip 5 with working yarn and back is again to just carry it behind peg 6 and in front, or with these 5 loops just waiting in the front there, and then knit 5 more. So that's peg 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. All right, so row 7 of the 8 has now been completed. Row 8 is where we finish off these 5 loops being held and complete our little shell shape on the stitch pattern. And you're going to knit 5 together, and then knit another 5. So starting with row or peg 11, we're just going to knit, and we're going to knit to peg 6 where all of our loops are being held. Okay, now to knit 5 together, all we're going to do is lay the working yarn across the top of all those loops like a U-stitch, and just one at a time, without changing the tension of these loops, just lift them over the working yarn and off the top of the peg in order. Let's see. That and like that. Okay, and then sometimes I just pull my yarn a little bit to give it a little bit more space for all of these stitches to sit behind. And then we're going to go ahead and finish the row by knitting the rest of the stitches 5 down to 1. There we are, and that completes our 8 rows of the Scalloped Shell Stitch. And here's what it looks like completed here. Isn't that gorgeous? Thank you for joining us today, and I hope that you have so much fun whipping up your own shells and scallops, and I'm excited to see what you create from this lovely, lovely stitch. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.